Hi, I'm Tom Williams II. I'm joined by Association President candidate Pia Szabo. Now, Pia, can you tell us a bit more about you?
Sure thing. I'm a fourth year studying art history and management. I am from New York, but I'm here on an Austrian passport. That's where all my family is. And yeah, I like St. Andrews.
Any particular reason you want to be Association President?
Yeah, a lot of my friends, when I tell them I really want to run for a full-time position in St. Andrews for a fifth year, they look at me like I'm crazy and just ask, how could you want to stay in a small Scottish town for another year? But I'm just not done with St. Andrews yet. I think there's work to be done and that I'm the most qualified to do it and can do the best job of it.
Okay, now let's crack straight into your manifesto. There was a placeholder on your site which says stay tuned for a sexy manifesto. You've also promised to dye your hair to brown if you win. Are you taking the job seriously?
Yeah, sure thing. I posted my mini manifesto today with a link to my full manifesto on my Tumblr page. I think the mini manifesto shows that I do take this seriously while also trying to communicate to students on platforms that they could better understand. Frankly, not a lot of students are going to read an 1,100-word manifesto. So my mini manifesto breaks it down into bullet points instead. And in terms of the dyeing my hair brown, you gotta have a little pizzazz to your campaign.
So it just makes you more relatable then?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Now, in your manifesto, you actually say, I will not raise university managed accommodation costs. Do you have control over RBS now?
No, but the president does have a say in that. For example, a couple of years ago, Pat Matthewson, in both of his years, did raise costs, mostly to fund his projects like the night bus, which was a great addition for students, but I think this year, in the landscape that we are running for presidents in, it would absolutely not be appropriate to raise accommodation in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. Now, there's 5 different candidates running for this position. What sets you apart from all the others?
I mean, chiefly my experience. I think I've been both inside the union all over the place and outside of the union. My experience is two-pronged in that way, I think. And I have the ideas and relationships already in place to really make the most of this role.
Okay, can you expand a little bit more on your experience within the union?
Yeah, sure thing. When I was a second year, I started one of the base levels of the union as I was the tech director for Just So, an affiliated society. Then I was the society's grants officer, also my second year on the society's committee, which is a subcommittee of councils, which is kind of like our student government in the union. And then I was the head of that committee, so I'm the society's officer. So I oversee over 160 plus affiliated societies and a £35,000 grants bursary. And during my time on that role put me onto councils, and then I became the head of my branch of councils, which has put me onto board. So I've literally been through every single step and level of the union.
Okay, fair enough. And if anything about the current administration under Lewis would, what would you criticise, what would you change?
For sure. I'd say there are 2 main things. One's broad and one's a little bit specific. In terms of broadly, I don't think Lewis addressed environment at all this year. And I think having an entire subcommittee under the president dedicated to that, I think it's a shame that he didn't really utilize it at all. In my manifesto, I talk about my single-use plastic fighting campaign that I would love to get the subcommittee on board with. And then more specifically, I think Lucent's Act did a great job trying to manage student response to the strikes, and they took an elegant position, but I do think they could have done a much better job of pushing out information to students about what was happening, how they could participate, what opinions they could form. Yeah, so those would be my 2 main critiques.
Okay, no worries. In your manifesto, you also mentioned the selling of private information from societies to the university in order to promote alumni, like fundraising, etc. Do you think that alumni would feel comfortable with their information being sold without their consent to the university?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely couldn't do it without consent. Data laws are actually changing right now, data protection laws, which as society's officer I've been watching closely to try and figure out what we're going to do with society membership lists and how to help us affiliated societies protect their members' information. So it is a bit of an ongoing thing. Those laws will be passed through probably by the summer. So by the time I'm taking office, we'll have a more clear idea of what's allowed and what's not, and what form that plan could really take shape in.
Okay, no worries. Can you perhaps tell me a little bit more about your budgetary role and how that will help you as the president?
Sure thing. In terms of
your previous experience that you've had.
Sure thing. I'd say my main two experiences with budgeting have come from the Societies Committee and the £35,000 grants budget, and then also being on the Union's Board's Finance Committee, which oversees all of the finances of the Union, from the bars to the subcommittees to the block grant that the Union receives from the university every year. For the £35,000 from Societies Committee, it's been really interesting to see how we divvy that up between societies and what societies come to us for various events and what they need money for. We funded everything from speaker talks to go-karting to picnics. I love that process just to see what societies are up to, and it's kind of fun just to see what societies have what money and how that's all spread out. Yeah, so that's been managing that. You have to make sure that you don't run out of money, obviously, and that you have enough money for the Szabo awards, and just to make sure that all the societies feel like they're given the right attention and that you say no to grants or yes to grants for the right reasons. In terms of the Finance Committee, it took me a while to figure out what those papers meant, because as a 19-year-old, as a trustee of a charity, I really had no idea what these £2 million budgets were even saying. But Jillian in the cash office has been a great help to me. She walked me through all of those complex numbers and saying why bars run at some deficits sometimes, or how we block buy things. And I understand that while $2 million is a big number, it doesn't mean that we just have £2 million in profit and that it's tied up in so much else.
Okay, it's a large charity to oversee, but in your manifesto you also mention you're more than a bar. Can you elaborate on what that is?
Yeah, definitely. That's got to be my favorite point. I decided to name it More Than a Bar because I realized I was covering things like accountability, transparency, accessibility, which are just cringy campaign words that I think really lose their meaning as soon as you say them. But that point is really about, it's two-pronged in that making the union and its inner workings more visible to students and then getting students more involved. In terms of transparency, if you will, I have a bunch of easy ideas, just publishing SAB calendars, making the student emails, things that you really want to read.
Aren't SAB calendars already available online?
SAB calendars? Some of them are, but I don't think, they're not easy to find off the top of my head. I genuinely couldn't tell you where they are.
Okay, what kind of things would you be detailing on SAB calendars?
Yeah, I think genuinely saying, I have a meeting with the principal today, or I have a meeting with Fife Council today. And just, if students have questions, great. If not, that's also fine. Obviously, sometimes there will be confidential information, so maybe there's just a gray box for that hour, but I think that could be respected by students.
Okay. Yeah. And how overall is this going to increase accountability, as you mentioned earlier?
I think if you're transparent, you can't do things in a shady manner. Simple as that. I mean, it is a two-pronged communication thing that you can both put information out there, but students have to want the information as well. So, I mean, we can't control what students think all the time, but all we can do is try to get them in fun ways, like you were saying, telling them you'll dye your hair back to brown if that's what it takes to get them to read the third point, which is about your manifesto and more important things. Okay.
Now, obviously, student participation is key to accountability and transparency, as you mentioned before. How are you going to drive up student participation?
It really depends on what way they're trying to participate. If it's with societies, I mean, obviously that's where I have most of my experience. Societies do a great job of getting students involved, and we're affiliating new societies every week. So I think just finding student interest is a great way, and supporting them and showing them how they can get involved with the things they want to do. And also saying I think it's okay if students do just see the union as a bar sometimes. It is a fun venue space as well. But there's so much that I think is underutilized, and it's always incredible to me when I meet someone and they're not a part of any societies and don't know that Star Radio is a thing or that Rector's Cafe is a cafe. Yeah, so I think reaching those kind of fringe students I think would be really, really fun and an interesting initiative that I'd like to undertake.
Okay, well let's bounce back to housing for a minute. So you said you're going to try and cap accommodation costs. Obviously the manifesto is a tiny bit misleading in the fact that it almost implies that you have control over it. But what else will you be doing with student housing?
Yeah, definitely. I think the president does do so many things behind closed doors that no candidate truly has a grasp on how much say the president has really, or what kind of conversations they're a part of. But I think as long as the president has a one-track mind of saying there needs to be more affordable accommodation, and even just more accommodation, if that's always in the forefront of their mind, I think things will change. More specifically, one of the things that's in my mini manifesto is that Lewis has been putting pressure on the university to change from a retail price index evaluation of our properties to a consumer price index, so RPI and CRI. So yeah, little things like that, just change the valuations so they truly reflect what students can pay and should be paying, are changes that the president does have say and can definitely push for.
Okay, and how will you be fighting on the HMO issue?
I'd love to use the resources available, so the forums, the access to landlords, access to letting agencies. Obviously, I'm not well versed in retail law, in real estate law, but I could be. Yeah, so I think there's definitely more information out there to be learned first before being able to really fight it. But I think saying, yes, I will fight the HMO ban at all costs is what the president should be doing.
Okay, no worries. And if anything about your manifesto, which key point sticks out as the number one thing you will be pursuing?
There are a lot of parts to it. I truly say the more than a barness, because it covers my point about student opinion as well, and in a way covers the alumni thing, and that the union can be more than just a bar and can also help you with job opportunities. Through alumni, it can help change the environment. The union can really help support students throughout Brexit and can help you find accommodation, but the union is so much more than a bar.
In your More Than a Bar, you mentioned social media quite frequently. How will you improve the union's social media experience?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'd attribute most of that to advertising is my dream job, so I think that's where most of my branding experience, I'm doing all my own graphics and marketing. So yeah, most of that point is centered around social media, and I think Andy in the design suite, or the design department, has done a great job of starting to make cool GIFs or GIFs, how you pronounce it, and interactive videos that catch students' eyes on their newsfeed, and that we can compete with their dog videos and their recipe cooking videos that appear on their newsfeeds. But yeah, there is obviously more to be done. Those things are always changing, and I think one graphic design template must change from year to year. There has to be a cool brand for every year. And I think my main point is that if you tell freshers from day one, this is the way things are done, you read the all-student emails and you want to get involved, that freshers then set the trend for the next 4 years of classes behind them in being engaged.
You mentioned this quite a lot in your manifesto, but can you comment on the union being a political body and what it means to you?
Sure thing. When I was starting to do research for this role and what students really want, quite a few of my friends critiqued that the union's not political enough. And I found it interesting because they were coming from very disparate political views of my friends. But I think Lewis this year started Polis, which is a non-affiliated but union-supported political group with all the political societies, which I think is a great and brilliant idea. They could really be a mouthpiece for student politics, and although they're not union affiliated, I think they would be able to be a body that could form motions that could then get passed back to councils, like the strike action motion.
So would you like to see them be affiliated or not?
I do think there are merits to them not being affiliated, but I mean, I'm the society's officer, I think everyone should be affiliated, whether they only want to use us for room bookings or even just the grants bursary that they would have access to. I think they'd be missing out by not being affiliated. But I think, especially being a political source, sometimes you do, if you're going to be solely political, you have to be able to put student needs aside, which as president, I don't think you should ever have a conflict of interest. You should always be speaking for students and never a political party. But Polis being extra union, I think they definitely have the platform through which to discuss whatever they want. Yeah.
Thank you. You also talk in your manifesto about introducing a town hall style. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, this is something I'm really excited about. It's modeled on the Society's Committee office hours, which are held every Monday. For 2 hours we just sit there. Sometimes we have people queuing up in main bar to speak to us. Sometimes there aren't that many people, but I do think it's one thing that I've really pushed as my time during Society's officer, just to be more visible, and society seemed to be responding really well to that. So this would be just taking that onto a grander level, the top level, if you will, of just being accessible as the president. I'm aware that probably it'll turn into students yelling at me for a bit, but I mean, either way, when you yell about something, it means like it's important to you, and what's important to students is something that the president cannot lose touch with. And, yeah.
Obviously, crucial to having students yelling at you is students being there in the first place.
Yeah.
Quite often, more often than not, the Joint Council's meetings are empty aside from a few members of the same. How will you encourage students to attend these meetings and become more involved in student politics?
For sure. I mean, my town hall idea is very separate to the joint councils meetings idea. In joint councils, we have to discuss things that are very subcommittee specific, that require a certain amount of knowledge to understand, and meetings would slow down drastically if we tried to stop them and explain them without students coming, having done a bit of their homework and learning about the subcommittees. Sorry, what was the question?
How will you drive up student participation at the town halls
Right.
and/or joint council meetings?
Yeah. So again, just all coming down to social media and advertising and getting the message out there to students and making it something relatable and that they want to do. At the hall hustings so far this week, the best turnouts have been ones where there are free pizza. So, I mean, offering students something, even if it's a tongue-in-cheek way to get them to pay attention, I think is well worth it.
Mm-hmm. And can you comment as well on what you'll be fighting for under Brexit, the negotiations ongoing?
Yeah, sure thing. I think I'm in a unique position because I'm here as an Austrian citizen, so an EU student, but I do pay international fees, so I see financially how, if EU students weren't allowed their EU status, how they might feel about that being an international student. I think, again, it's similar to my answer on housing. The president just has to have a one-track mind of protecting EU students' rights the way they are right now, and that it would be horrible if EU students couldn't work here after university or couldn't come to this university in the first place. It would change the way that we know St. Andrews for the worse, without a doubt in my mind. So to fight against that, I think any discussion that the president is involved in about Brexit has to be one with a strong stance against it and against changing things that shouldn't be changed. And I think what Lewis has done this year with creating the petition that a lot of other universities signed is a great way for us to clearly communicate, hey, Scottish higher education thinks this.
So it's more sort of a continuation of the same in regards to Brexit, so similar to what Lewis is doing is what you're proposing.
Yeah, I do think it's difficult because there's such a lack of information and clarity right now, and that can go for anyone involved in Brexit, like whether it's Scottish higher education as a whole, if you make textiles. I think every industry will be affected, but every industry is just in such a weird limbo right now that, yeah, the only thing you can do is focus on moving forward and getting ready for change.
Okay, that's about all we have time for. This has been a special report from the Saint. I'm joined by Szabo. Thank you very much for watching.